Let's begin with a word of prayer together. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth, the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Years ago, my very first call out of seminary was working in a small church and was asked to give a message at a baccalaureate service. And all the upcoming graduates for that year were going to be recognized, and this particular school did a baccalaureate service for the actual graduation service. And that particular service was led by the Ministers Association there in that community and was asked to give the message for the day. And this was the actual text I used for that baccalaureate service way back many years ago. I got to thinking about those that were graduating, because on graduation day, there are some that just had their gowns and that was it. And there were some that had gowns and they had some cords. And then some had gowns with cords and stoles and all kinds of stuff and all kinds of regalia on when they walked in. I'm like, well, that person must have done something really good, and this person accomplished this, and this person's got this cord because they did such a great job academically. And usually in the program it would say what the cords and the sashes and all that mean, and you're kind of recognizing all the accolades that people had. And at the baccalaureate service, when I preached this text, I basically said to those graduates that day, some of you have done some awesome academic work, and some of you have struggled just to get the basic grades to get graduated for this experience. And regardless of whether you struggled just to get your diploma, or some of you exceeded and was like the top 10 in your class, when you walk across the stage and you're handed your high school diploma, there is no difference in the diploma. You get the exact same diploma. You may have had different dimensions of what you accomplished, but the actual degree itself is the same. And I could see some of those that had cords and sashes. Well, that doesn't seem fair. I mean, I really did well in this class. You could see some of the disappointment that the degree would actually be the same for each of them, even though their academic GPAs might have been a little differently. So sometimes disappointment shows up even when you're getting the same thing. You think it's not the same thing. And if we get the same thing, we sometimes feel disappointed that I get the same thing that someone else got. But disappointment's not just about fairness in how things work, maybe educationally. As the story points out, sometimes we sense a sense of fairness around what we work for, what we put our time and energy and sweat into. I think of the disappointment that's going on right now in our country with the auto worker union. We have CEOs and heads of companies taking gigantic bonuses, and yet the average worker that's on the assembly line is not getting basic, equitable response for the work they put in. We have 3 major American companies dealing with issues of labor and wages, and we see a disproportionate amount of wages going to some people and not enough to others. We see it in the education field. We can't seem to get our educators in the public school systems enough money and raises to help take care of their families. They can't even afford in the schools to do their own supplies. Teachers have to pay for their own supplies for the schoolroom and the classrooms. It's difficult to see this discrepancy of fairness. We sometimes see this unfairness and this disappointment with the equity of how we deal with labor in our country. But sometimes disappointment simply comes with the formation of relationships. One of my close colleagues, when he was young in ministry, got to work with his mentor in ministry. He was super excited. He got to spend an entire year under the mentorship of the person he looked up to the most. He said, my understanding of church and how to do ministry all came from this particular individual. At the end of his year-long mentorship, the minister sat my friend down and said, "I've got something difficult I need to share with you. I've been having an affair with the secretary in the church, and I'm going to be leaving the church and leaving the ministry altogether." My friend had put his mentor way up here in terms of this person was to meet these expectations of this kind of function in ministry, this kind of care of relationships within the life of the church and the staff. And this mentor of his not only disappointed him, my friend was ready to give up on ministry altogether himself. And just his idea of ministry had been shattered by his mentor and his mentor's behavior. He says, "I'm just going to give up the church. I'm going to give up God. I'm going to give up all these things." And we reach a place of deep disappointment. Sometimes we just want to just forget it all. I'm disappointed enough. I'm just giving up. I'm not going down that path any longer. There's one pastoral care scholar that says sometimes, at least when it comes to issues of faith and crisis of faith, when it comes to our relationship with God, we sometimes put people in between ourselves and God. And so if this person is the person that best represents who God is, and that person disappoints us, then God disappoints us at the same time. We have to somehow put our relationships with people in one direction, our relationship with God in another, so that people don't get in the way of our relationship with God. My friend and I, we were then going to room together the next year, and we shared a bathroom, and I would get up earlier than him and get ready for the day earlier than him. And every day I had one of the little Post-it notes, and I'd leave him a little message on the mirror when it was his time to get ready for the day and start the day. It was simply, "I'm thinking about you today." That's all it said on the sticky note. Next day, "You got this." The next day, another sticky note. "As crazy as it sounds, I love you for who you are." I mean, every day, just a different message. And I'd come back and never said a thing about them. But they were always no longer stuck to the mirror, so I know he saw them and pulled them down. And about a year and a half later, he said, "Those sticky notes, as silly as they might have been, got me through my deepest disappointments. You continued to remind me every day there was something greater at work than the way I had imagined it." Many times our disappointments are deepest to us. We have certain assumptions about how things are to work and how things are to operate and how people are to behave. I mean, we can kind of look at our country today and, man, this person's super disappointing. This person doesn't behave like any person should. And we can go through all the political discourse and all the different things that are out there, and disappointments are all over the place. And disappointments get us to a place of, is there any reason to even do this work? To be a part of these efforts, to do justice things, to stand up for the rights of others. We sometimes feel like there's an unfair dynamic that's going on in the human condition. We get disappointed and frustrated almost to the place of inaction in our life. But what if I told you that this particular parable really had nothing to do with wages and working conditions and any of that? What if Jesus told this story for a whole different reason altogether than the way we try to figure out fairness? Because Jesus was all about justice and equity and making sure that everyone was taken care of. To tell a story, well, this person gets this, and to disregard the heavy efforts that a person put in, it's like, well, it's worth the same as someone that worked an hour. It seems like an odd story for Jesus to tell when it comes to economic justice, when he stood for economic justice. What if the story was more about God and the relationship with God and humanity? And you look at the story, it's the person that's in charge of the vineyard is not really concerned really about the wages, and that the wage seems to be the same for everybody regardless of the hour. It's not really about the wages. It's not really concerned about how much work gets done. The owner of the vineyard's concerned about the condition of the laborers. That the laborers are all taken care of, that all of them have an opportunity to be exposed to the work in the story, or maybe to be exposed to the owner of the vineyard, who is God. Maybe the story is one in which we're simply have an opportunity to know who God is. Regardless if you're a person that's been a cradle person in the church from your birth, or this is the first time you've shown up in a church building, the tenure in our church should not matter in terms of the quality of relationship we have with God. Well, that person's been in the church for 45 years. I'm sure their faith is way stronger than mine. They've got way greater knowledge of the Bible than me, and they've got skills of prayer I don't have. They're much further along than I am. My guess is God doesn't care about the tenure of time as it is about the intent of the relationship that you have and the quality of the relationship you're trying to foster and create in your life. Looking up the word disappointment, I just simply put in disappointment antonym. And one of the words that came up in that was encouragement. I thought that was an interesting word that would come up as the opposite of disappointment is encouragement. When we're disappointed, we are functioning on an individual level. When we're not disappointed, when we do the opposite of functioning in a disappointment mindset, we're in an encouragement mindset. It was interesting, last week I mentioned Lynn Twist and said, the things you appreciate appreciates. She says in another chapter in her book is that collaboration creates the condition of thriving. That's kind of a cool kind of phrase. Collaboration creates the condition of thriving. We're not just thinking about me, we're thinking about us together. We collaborate on the staff. We collaborate with leadership circle. We collaborate with all the ministries of the church. The more we collaborate, the greater the opportunity for that organization to thrive. When the owner of the vineyard puts all these laborers out in the field, regardless of the time, the work they can do together is far greater. Regardless of when it is they join the effort, the long-term impact of the collaborative effort together has greater impact. And the collaborative efforts that are put together of people working together with one another allows for the opportunity for not only themselves, but the cause they're there for to be even greater than imagined. Collaboration, encouragement. Those are the kinds of things this parable is trying to get at and trying to help us understand in terms of its bedrock, in terms of gratitude. What does it mean to be gracious and have a spirit of gratitude and be generous and have all those pieces? So we have a collective mindset versus an individual mindset in our life. I think of all the people that have been encouragers to me, both in and out of the church, both in Christianity and other faith traditions. I've had so many encouragers in my life. It inspired me to be an encourager of others. Just as I'm being encouraged, I'm going to encourage someone else. We'll greet some guests here a week from today with Interfaith Hospitality Network. And sometimes when someone is unhoused, as we know in this country, many of us can live paycheck to paycheck. And one little mess up along the way, and we're outside of our context of having a stable living environment. we as hosts have an opportunity in that kind of space to be an encourager, to lift people up, to recognize that they're no worse off than me in terms of who they are as a person, just their conditions are different. When I think of the enemy of gratitude as we fail to be encouragers and collaborators and working together, I've seen at St. Andrew when a team of people come together to do something, and the creative environment that's formed in that team, we have a particular ministry, a purpose in the life of the church. We gather together as a whole congregation to do those things. It is amazing the things that we can accomplish when we encourage and collaborate versus isolating and seeing all these ministry as silo activities that we do. They're all overlapping to the greater purpose of helping us better understand the very nature and love and grace of God. At our root, we want works, the things we do, to prove our worth. Well, I got this grade. I worked this many hours. I know this many people. I have sent these many emails. I produced this amount of income for your company. We all have, if I do all these things, I'm going to be rewarded. But it's less about the things that we do, even though we want to use the gifts that God has given us to make a difference in the world. The parable reminds us it's about the quality of the relationships we have around us that make all the difference. And recognizing that God provides the space and the environment for grace to simply be and be the operative of our encouragement of one another. Amen.